We're at the end of the story now. The character has overcome the big obstacles, they've overcome several smaller obstacles as well, and they've fought back against all the elements that you've put into the story that they needed to overcome. So they've changed, they are a new person now. It is now time to send the listener or the viewer away with a good feeling, a happy ending. Now sometimes it can be an option to end on a high, showing the last obstacle, showing the character overwinning the last obstacle, and that's it. The problem with that is that people don't have kind of like the feeling of settling down, as in, oh, we know that everything is now all right. Even though they've overwon the last obstacle, people want to see the new me of the character. They want to see the new situation. They want to see the happily ever after from the fairy tales. Most movies, most TV shows, most books, most stories don't end on the high, but end on just a little bit after that. There are a few things you need to keep in mind when it comes to the ending of your story. First of all, you want to keep the ending in mind throughout your story. You're working towards that ending. So everything that happens within the story, in the end, has to do with the ending. Now that means that in some cases, it might be a good idea to start writing the ending before you start writing the rest of the story, before you start creating the obstacles. Because then you can build it up towards the bigger obstacle in the end and a nice ending. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is the hero, your main character. You want to make sure that at the end of the story, the main character doesn't only come back, but also that the people can see how he's changed, how he or she has made a development in their personality. They are different now than they were in the beginning of the story, and you want to highlight that at the end of the story. What's very important at the end of the story is to close the circle. And with closing the circle, I mean referring back to the message that you were starting with in the beginning of the story. So take a look back at your notes. You wrote down what it was that you wanted to get out of the story, and you wrote down what your message was. That message has to come back at the end of the story. If you don't do that, people will be confused. Especially in business stories, the emphasis on the message is important. You want to refer back to the original message so that people go like, oh, wait a minute. When you're using stories in a presentation, you can play with it a little bit. Now, for example, if you start telling a story in the beginning of a presentation, you would think, okay, you end the story and then you continue with the presentation. But you could also do it a little bit different. For example, not telling the exact ending of the story until later on in the presentation or even at the end of the presentation. Let me give you an example. I've told this story quite a few times in my presentations as well. It was a story that was meant to show the audience that we have to be careful with a lot of information that is just out there because people don't necessarily know what they are looking for. I told the story of how me and my family went on a trip to Thailand and that we wanted to travel around and that we were looking for backpacks and I couldn't find them. I didn't finish the story in the beginning of the presentation. I just showed a lot of backpacks. I showed the problem that I had. And then I started comparing it with the internet and how much information was on the internet. It wasn't until the end of the presentation that I referred back to the story, showing a picture of my kids with the backpacks that we found in the end. That was the happy ending, and we lived happily ever after. We did find the backpacks in the end. It's not a must, but sometimes ending with a quote makes for a great ending. Because a quote is something that sticks. It's something that people can walk away with and that they can write down at the end of your presentation. It's also something that makes that you can refer back to your message quite easily. The one quote that says it all.